Watch him down, boys! Sure or not? Hey, that's nice, though. So, welcome to the Traveling Bird Hunter Podcast. My name's Ryan Reddick, and I'll be hosting the podcast. I've hunted upland birds in my home state of Oklahoma all of my adult life, and over the last 15 years have traveled in pursuit of game birds to Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Kansas, Wyoming, and Michigan, and probably some other states as well. This great country is incredibly majestic, and especially so when viewed from behind a pair of bird dogs. I've met dozens of wonderful people in the uplands, and I hope to introduce you to as many of them as I can through this podcast. Join me as I travel the uplands learning about birds, dogs, and guns. Today I'll be talking with a longtime friend and landowner here in Oklahoma about the difficulties of controlling access and the best methods to approach a landowner about permission to hunt. We'll also discuss some of the excellent blue quail and pheasant hunts we've enjoyed together through the years, as well as our travels together to hunt birds in Arizona, Colorado, and Michigan. This podcast is sponsored by Pike Gear. An upland hunter who hunts hard needs clothing that is light and makes hunting easier, not harder. An upland hunter is always on the move and always thinking about his next move. He needs clothing that can move with him, clothing that doesn't hold him back or weigh him down. Pike Gear is designed for upland hunters who are always on the go and always dreaming about their next hunting trip. Visit pikegear.com to find the best upland hunting clothing you will ever wear. To follow our adventures, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And Jason, you and I both know Brent Pike, who is through Pike Gear sponsoring this podcast, and he's a heck of a guy, isn't he?
He is a heck of a guy, and I think he's got a great idea with what he's trying to do there. For a lot of us, the model-style hunting clothes don't fit us well.
That would sure be true of me, undoubtedly.
I don't wear a skinny pants.
Yeah, me either. Although Mike Carmody sure does. Makes me laugh. So, Jason, tell the people who you are. You're a rancher and farmer in the Oklahoma Panhandle. Is that right?
I am a rancher, a farmer. We don't have any mama cows anymore, but we do background stocking, and then we have a couple of feed yards and some pork production, as well as some crop production, although we've been renting out more of our crop land and focusing on the animals. Animal livestock has just become such a capital-intensive business that we've been focusing more there. And our family has been raising livestock, really cattle, in the Panhandle of Oklahoma for over 130 years.
130 years. I know maybe you don't. It's not as interesting to you as it is to me, but back when we first met, 20 years ago, you gave me a copy of the book that was written about your family. And I can't remember what the name of it is. I'm sure you know the name right off the top of your head.
Panhandle Pioneer.
There you go, Panhandle Pioneer. And I have to tell you, Jason, you're the only guy I know personally that has a book written about his family.
Well, in Oklahoma, there's a wonderful publishing press that's associated with the University of Oklahoma that specifically is focused on writing Oklahoma's stories. And at one point there was a gentleman, and I can't think of his first name, but his last name is Green, and he covered a bunch of the centennial ranch and farming entities across the state, and we were just fortunate enough to be one of them.
And what a cool way to teach your family, your children and your grandchildren, hopefully eventually, about your family. You know, to me that seems like a wonderful thing.
It has been really neat, and like I said, it gives a pretty good record and an account through, I think, the late 70s, early 80s of our family and how we ended up where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah, and you told me one time about, it may have been your grandfather, but I think it was your great-grandfather who, like, would go with the hands with the herd to, the delivery point up by Liberal, Kansas, when he was like 14 years old.
That's right. He was the trail boss, and he handed out the cash and helped cook the food and did all that stuff. He did that for years until the roads filled in and the fences were built, and that sort of became a piece of history.
And would that have been? I mean, when would that have been? Like the teens and the 20s?
Yeah, I think he was born in 16 or 17, 1916 or 17. And so that would have been in the early 20s, mid 20s, because he started going when he was 8 or 9 with his dad. But it got to where his dad would just send him, and by the late 20s, early 30s, he was doing it all by himself most every trip.
So he would take like the steers and the heifers that were going to auction or going to sale, and with a group of cowboys, hands, that would all be undoubtedly older than him, and they would travel to the railhead. He would make the sale and then carry the cash back to the ranch.
That is correct. And he would dole out the pay to the hired hands. And my great-grandfather had an absolute no alcohol on the place. If you want to do that, you're going to hoop and holler while you're in town. But when you get back home, that was done. And so he would dole out their pay, and they would wait, I believe, 1 or 2 nights in the camp outside of town, and then they would break camp and start riding back for home. And, if you screwed up and didn't make it, you had to find your own way back home.
And the distance, I mean, people may not have the concept of distance. I know that relatively the distance between the headquarters, the ranch headquarters and probably the railhead, what would that be, 50 miles one way?
Yeah, 50 miles one way. And it would have been, it's not super rough country, but it would not have been easy going back then.
Yeah. God, how tough he must have been. People were just tougher back then, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And they didn't know any better. It's just the way it was.
Yeah. That story always amazes me. So right now well, how much property do you oversee?
We oversee roughly 28,000 acres. A touch over 30, I guess, with some of the stuff we've got picked up in the last few years. And it's mostly farmland, but there's probably 10,000 acres of rolling grass hills.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say farmland, most of it's irrigated farmland.
That's correct.
Which the crops that you produce have varied through the years, but wheat is a consistent. You grow corn consistently. You've grown sunflowers, and I'm trying to think what else I've walked through out there.
We've had barley. We've had sorghum silage. I'm trying to think. I don't know if you ever walked through it. We've had soybeans, and
God, soybeans are great for pheasant.
Did you walk through the switchgrass we grew for that ethanol plant?
Oh God, did we ever?
You could almost just push through it, but it was hard going.
And it wasn't, in most places, it wasn't really tall, but God, it was so thick the dogs could barely run through it in places.
Yep, they mostly trailed behind you. They didn't want to push out in front.
And then the year before the drought hit, that switchgrass was, oh my Lord, Jason, it was so full of pheasants.
Oh yeah.
I killed so many pheasants out there that year.
It was the only place they could get any place that had cover.
I remember, it was just amazing. So do you still have any of that switchgrass out there by the feedlot?
Most of it didn't make it through the drought. We still have some corners and stuff that are still in switchgrass, but a lot of it that was irrigated, we went ahead and it died, and because we didn't water it, and we went ahead and plowed it up and turned it into another crop. Yeah. But there's a few places that they'd planted some drought-resistant varieties in some dry land, the corners and some other places, and it's still around in patches, but there's not a lot of it. There's probably less than 200 acres left. And
I bet even those patches aren't as thick as they were that first couple of years.
No, not even close.
God, that stuff was so much fun. Down on the ranch proper, I mean, that is buffalo grass primarily, with rimrock and kind of creeks and draws. Describe that for people.
So we call it the breaks. It's a little river valley. It's about 150 foot below the level of the plains around it. And so you drive off of it, and the rock is really, it's just a clay packed rock. It's not really a hard formed. It's not, lava rock or anything
But
like
there's
that.
a lot of it showing.
There is, that where the edges where the river is worn away. It's over the last several thousand years. There's a lot of it showing. So you get these white rock kind of breaks along the edges, and you've got sage and all sorts of cactus, and then of course the buffalo grass, which is a really interesting grass in that it never really dies. It'll turn dry and crispy, but if you just put a little bit of water on it, it greens right up and goes right back to doing what it's doing. It's designed to survive in our drought-tolerant, freezing cold winter, everything else. And there's not much that can besides the cactus and the sage.
Yeah, and those rocks and down anywhere there's any kind of water at all, you got shinnery oak and sand plum and sagebrush down in the bottom. It's just great variety.
That's right. And then, you got a little bit of salt cedar and some things like that I think is more of an introduced variety. We don't have any of the red cedars or any of that kind of stuff, just that little kind of fluffy salt cedar stuff.
Yeah, and you used to have more cottonwoods. Even when I first hunted down there, you had more live cottonwoods than you currently do. The water level dropping has really cost you a lot of your big trees, hasn't it?
It really has. That has changed so tremendously in the last. When I was a kid, we could swim horses down the river and stuff, and we swam in the river. We don't even have a river anymore.
Yeah, there's just almost no water there at all. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I saw standing water. I guess maybe after that last big snow, where it melted, there was some water standing in places, but that was just surface water is all it was.
Yeah, that's right.
As far as game, I know you and I have pursued most of the game that's available on the ranch, but why don't you tell folks what you have down there?
Well, we've got for larger animals, we've got a little bit of muley population, mostly whitetails though, and we've got a few antelope that sneak around on us here and there, although they don't like the hills. They like more of the flat areas. So
they like to be able to see.
They do, and they see very well. They're a difficult animal to sneak up on. And then as far as the upland game, we've got what they call a blue quail or a scale quail, and then we've got bobwhites. And then our migratory birds would be doves, both the mourning and the collared now, the Euro collared dove. That's new, though, in the last 6-8 years. And we have several variety of ducks, mostly mallards that I see, and then, of course, teal and some of that stuff. And then we get the ribeye of the sky, the sandhill cranes.
Yeah, I bet that's right down there in the bottom.
It is.
And up on the wheat, too, up on the top.
That's right. And we'll also get geese that come in on the wheat, although I mostly leave them alone. It's just too much to mess with. And then we have turkeys that come through. They're not on us year round, but probably 7 or 8 months a year they're somewhere on the operation.
Yeah. And of course pheasant. We've shot a lot of pheasant on you.
Shot a lot of pheasant. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking of the ranch down there. Yes, a lot of pheasant. They have had in our area, although I don't think we have any on us. I've never seen one myself that I'm aware of, but within 100 miles of us, or probably even 50 miles of us, there's the lesser prairie chicken.
Oh, yeah. I've never seen a prairie chicken on you, but I wouldn't be surprised to.
I never have either. I know from history that our area is considered to be part of their area, but I've never seen one. They don't put up with people or cultivation or any of that kind of stuff very much. So
yeah, but you've got some places back there to the east of the headquarters that you'd think they might like if they ever get back in there, filter back in.
Yeah, I mean there are some places where I think they'd fit in. I don't know as much about them. I don't know exactly what all they eat or what they'll put up with as far as weeds and things.
I don't think they like people. I think they need open space, what I think.
Yeah.
Oh, and with the hog operations up on top, you guys kind of have farming interspersed with what probably was, it may still be CRP patches and then hog operation patches. So it's kind of a patchwork of different stuff, primarily irrigated circles.
That's correct. And we use the hog waste and the cattle waste, for that matter, to fertilize the circles. And it's been interesting since we put the hog operation in, and there's a waste lagoon tied to each barn or each set of barns. The pheasants and the quail in those areas have just taken off. You put water sources around them, and you wouldn't think that that would be an attractive water source, but it really apparently is.
I'm
I don't.
surprised how many bobwhites we see.
Yep, that's kind of what I was thinking. When I was a kid, we hardly ever saw them, and now I see them all over.
Yeah, I mean, not every one of those sites will have a covey of bobwhites, but every one of them that's got a little bit of kind of loafing cover, overhead cover, will have a covey of bobwhite around in a good year.
That's right.
And then the blues, I love to shoot your blue quail. The blue quail are, as you know, one of my absolute favorite species to shoot. I think they're a beautiful, beautiful bird, and I love how they hunt. I love they're hard flying birds, and they're just big enough when you pick them up. You know that they got a little bulk in your hand. Just absolutely one of my favorite birds. Tell folks about that big covey you got at the house.
We've got a covey that's been there for as long as I can remember, and I've certainly harassed it enough you'd think it wouldn't be. But since I was probably 8 or 10 years old, it's kind of been the go-to house covey. But it's probably 60 or 80 birds, and some years it'll get up to 150 birds. I was sitting this morning looking at some cattle coming off the trucks, and it took me a second to realize that the birds were all covied up under the feed trough, waiting for the feed truck to come by, just standing there in the shade of the feed trough. You know how you'll see them kind of moving around in there. It looks like a darker shadow, but they were all standing there waiting, just as trained as the cattle were, waiting for that feed truck to get there.
Then when you flush them, they'll fly up, kind of snug up next to that rim rock. And then if the dogs find them again, they'll fly over the top of the rim rock. And, you'll have like 2 seconds to shoot them before they get over the top of the rim rock. And then if you go up on top and the dogs point them, they'll just fly back down under the rim rock. And again, you got like 2 seconds.
That's exactly right. I mean, and, once you bust the covey the first time, you hunt singles, and I mean, they're running sons of a guns, and it's a lot more difficult. And like you said, a lot of fun. A lot of times you can see them way out in front of you, and it's just a matter of figuring out how to run them to ground or get around them to push them again.
Yeah, I love hunting those birds. And I mean, you've got other smaller coveys back on the ranch proper. Seems like I always shoot blue quail when I'm over there, and man, they're a lot of fun. Really a neat bird to chase.
They really are.
And your well, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was just going to say the behavior of them is predictable and yet still so extremely difficult to put your arms around that it makes it a lot of fun, even when you can sort of understand what they're running to or what they're doing.
And you probably don't get a lot of people wanting to come down and chase your blue quail, would be my guess. I mean, you got me.
Yeah, it's not the popular thing for people to come ask for permission. We've got 1 or 2 people in the area or in our company that like to chase them and have dogs. Blue quail just almost demand having a dog. I've hunted them without a dog, and I'll just tell you, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there wouldn't be a point. I don't see the point of quail hunting without a dog anyway, but it darn sure would be true of blue quail.
Yep.
So, of the species that you have on the ranch, my guess would be the deer hunting probably gets the most attention from folks wanting to hunt. Would that be a fair statement?
It'd be deer or pheasant. Those are the 2 big things that we get asked on. And the deer hunting we've basically given entirely to my employees because there's so little public hunting in our area and so few places where you can actually set out and hunt a deer, with a high-powered rifle, or even a bow for that matter, that we've made that basically exclusively available for my employees. And that's not 100% true because I've got some family that'll come out occasionally and hunt that live in the city, but for the most part, it's just employees, and I try to keep that fairly protected for them. The last several years, the only deer that have been taken off the place have been taken off by employees' children. And it's pretty cool to see a little boy or girl, and I say little, that's not fair, teenager all the way down to 6 and 8 year olds, taking their first animal off there and just being super pumped.
Oh yeah,
that is an awesome, awesome thing, and it's fun to share that with them. And
best deer hunt I've ever been on, not counting the ones you and I've been on, but the best deer hunts I've ever been on is when I took a teenage girl out and she shot a little 6-point whitetail. I guarantee I was more excited about it than she was.
But it's awesome, isn't it? I mean, it's
yeah,
when
beyond
it all comes
awesome.
together. Yeah, it comes all together for them, and they get that chance, and they succeed.
And I mean that deal you do with your employees, I've always thought that was just super cool, and that it's something that a lot of people don't think about. But your operation is corporate in nature, but including the farming and the ranching, certainly the hog operation and the feedlot, and so you have a lot of employees, relatively speaking.
Yeah, we have about 320 employees, and they range from very young to very old. Some of them have worked for us for 40 plus years, and some of them have worked for us for less than 10 days.
And you have, Jason, carved out the ability for those people to be able to hunt on your property, right?
That is correct.
You let them hunt. They don't have to ask. That's part of their employee benefits, isn't it?
Well, the only thing they've got to do is let someone know. We have some safety concerns, having people anywhere out on us that we don't know are there. Just if they have an accident or anything else. Heck, we had someone break an axle in their truck years ago. And I mean, it's a long walk back to basically anywhere. So we always want them to check in either with their superior or someone on the ranch or the farm to let them know they're going to be out there and what they're doing. But other than that, they don't have to do anything.
Yeah, so if I worked for your company, I could load my bird dog up and go out there and dump out in your grass fields or your corn patches after you harvest it and shoot pheasant, basically virtually as much as I would want to.
That's correct.
Well, and that is so cool, by the way. I just love that. And in addition, you have a fairly large extended family.
I do have a fairly large extended family, and they're not all here, which makes it a little bit easier. But I've got several cousins in the Oklahoma City area and Tulsa area, and then scattered all over the U.S. And it seems like Thanksgiving and Christmas is a big time for family to come visit. And of course, that ties right into quail and pheasant season, and a little bit of deer season. And that's always a big deal for them, especially when they bring their kids.
Yeah. And I'm sure moving all those pieces around the chessboard is kind of a pain, isn't it?
It makes it difficult. I mean, you got to keep track of a lot and make sure that you're setting something aside for them, assuming they all tell you what they're planning. And it's takes a lot of thinking about it and everything else, but at the same time, you love to do it and try to make it work for everybody. The best
it doesn't
part
make you any money, though, does it?
No, we don't charge anybody for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you take all this time to figure it all out. You invest in it time-wise, and doesn't make you a dime, does it?
Doesn't make us a dime. We don't even try.
Yeah. And in fact, probably ends up costing you money in some ways.
Oh, it certainly costs us money because we put out some waters and feeders and try to do a little bit of management, although we're not super active managers. It takes time, and then you've got to manage the people. Just like you mentioned, we let our employees hunt, but we ask them to be respectful and let people know. And occasionally we'll say this pasture's closed because we're saving that, or this field is closed because we're saving it for customers or family or something, and give them a day when the customers or family are going to come. And once they're done, then it's back to being free game for anybody else in the company.
Your dad was a big hunter, wasn't he?
He was an extremely big hunter. It was one of his favorite things to do, and he raised my brother and I to be the same way.
And it seems to me like he was kind of equal opportunity. He'd go deer hunting. I think you talked about him going bear hunting and doing all kinds of fun, exotic big game hunts, and then he'd also grab a shotgun and go out and shoot pheasant with his customers.
That's absolutely right. He kind of like me. I've got you and our friends, and he had a group of friends that were all big hunters and outdoor people, and they like to go chase stuff all over, and he certainly took advantage of that, and I do the same. He raised us to be that way, and I take just as much pleasure in simply being outside and the opportunity to watch nature.
So what's the coolest thing your dad shot?
Oh, let's see. The coolest thing and the coolest places he shot. He did one of those fly out into the brush country of Alaska and be dropped off on a pond and then not picked up for 12 days or whatever. And they just kind of lived in some wall tents up there and walked out on the tundra each day. And I think there were 6 of them. And they chased, they all had tags for caribou, and then a few of them bought bear tags, and a couple of them bought, I can't remember, a few other animal tags. And, they would start out in the morning all together and end up in the evening all together. But for the most part, you're just wandering around in Alaska on your own, looking for whatever it was you were looking for. And he shot a caribou and some ptarmigan and some stuff like that. And he had a blast, and the stories from that were simply amazing. They flew a plane up there for someone to deliver it to Alaska. So it was a one-way trip on that count, but the plane broke down and they had all sorts of trouble, but heck, that was half the adventure of getting there. And
So they
got
flew a small plane to Alaska, he and his hunting buddies.
Yes. And then they got up there, and the very first night they didn't, they said there wasn't a lot of trees around them. And the guy had told him about, putting the bear bag up and all that. And he's looking around and he said, there's just no place to hang a bear bag. And they decided to put the bear bag in I think it was a canoe, and then push the canoe out in the lake, with a rope on it.
Yeah, like a bear can't swim.
Yeah, that was exactly what they discovered. The bear swims just fine.
Yeah.
And so the bear ate, I think it was most of their meat or something. Anyway, that was how he ended up hunting ptarmigan for a day and a half, because they didn't have anything else. And they didn't really have they had an emergency way to get a hold of them in case someone got hurt. But other than that, they're not coming back to drop off food. You're on your own.
Yeah. God, I wonder what it cost me to have that case of whiskey shipped in with all my other hunting gear.
I am sure they packed that in there. They certainly enjoyed that stuff. That was a really cool hunting trip he told me about. And then they did a couple of really neat hunting trips up into the Colorado Rockies and maybe Idaho for moose and some things like that. And like I said, as much as anything, it's the camaraderie. The animal that they hunted or took was almost just the sidebar. The chance to go out and do that stuff with their friends and spend 10 or 12 days hiking around in the wilderness was the goal, I guess you might say.
Did your grandfather hunt too?
He loved to hunt. He ended up being more of an upland hunter, although he took several bear. He did enjoy bear hunting, but he didn't shoot very many deer or elk or other things like that. He mostly focused on upland game. He liked to hunt ducks. We had some family and some customers down in Louisiana and Florida area, and he took every chance he got to go down there and set in the blind and hunt ducks. And he also enjoyed talking to people.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I travel to hunt and have regularly for the last 15 years or so. Can you remember the first trip we took, out-of-state trip we took?
That's what I was trying to think. Well, I know we ran up to Kansas and down to Texas a couple of times, just right here close, within 50 miles.
But we didn't spend the night out, Well, maybe in Texas we might have. Did we go down and hunt with Joe one time, maybe?
We did go down and hunt with Joe. That's right. We stopped and hunted the geese or whatever on that one trip, and then went on down. But yeah, so I mean, we started out doing that, just little, day trips and stuff, and a couple of, I guess, 1 or 2 overnight trips, and then we decided to pack it all in and take a long trip. We went out to Arizona. I think was our first great big hunt. And
did we do that 3 years in a row?
3 years in a row.
Maybe even 4, but I think it was just 3.
We got a little nervous. There was some stuff going on there for a while. And they droughted out just like we did. I mean,
while we were down there that last year, they had that incursion where those like armed Hummers came across from Mexico into the United States, and they sent out choppers and stuff. I remember when we got back, we didn't know anything about it while we were down there. But when we get back, that was really pretty close to where we were hunting.
Wasn't that the same year that they were having all the? We met the Border Patrol agents preparing to do a raid, and they had their they were putting on their armor and everything else and preparing to run down through the brush. And and we were pulling in a dog cart and
orange shirts. Yeah. And the kid, remember the young kid that was a Border Patrol agent? He was like, "What are you guys doing?" "Oh, we're quail hunting." "Quail? What kind of quail?" "Mearns quail." "Do you have any? I want to see them." And we showed them to him, and he's like, "So that's what's been scaring me to death when I'm creeping through the brush chasing illegals."
That's exactly right. And I think he said he was from like Illinois or something. He liked quail hunting.
Yeah.
He was going to try to get his dad to ship him his shotgun down.
Yeah, those kids were actually really nice people.
They were.
They thought we were crazy down there quail hunting right on the border.
Well, and there's nothing like at the end of the day drinking a beer and sticking one foot through the fence into Mexico.
Teasing fate.
That's right.
And what years would that have been, Jason, when we were going to Arizona? Probably in 08, don't you think? Maybe 09?
Yeah. I think it was actually a little before that. My dad passed away in 08. I think we went maybe in 06, 07, and then 08, or 07, 08, and 09, something like that.
Doggone, that seems like a long, long time ago. We need to go back, don't we?
We do. I'd be glad to go back.
Go back to Sierra Vista, and we'd have to find a little better hotel this time, I think.
Well, that's pretty tough when you're taking your dogs.
Yeah.
That restricts you from several good places.
And we hunted all the way back around past Sedona, all down in there.
Yeah, north of Tombstone.
That was back east.
Yep.
Larry seemed to like that desert country better than he liked the Mearns quail country for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe he could see. I like the Mearns quail country. That stuff's just pretty special hunting.
It was. I agree.
And those birds are special. The way they hold in tight on a dog and flush just crazy and hard to hit. And then God, so beautiful, beautiful, beautiful birds. And then in Texas we hunted bobwhite, and there were probably some blues too. Or on the ranches we hunted down in Texas with Joe.
I think that's right.
Where were we? We were over east of Childress, back up in there.
Yeah, southeast of Childress, wasn't it?
Yeah, and no, west. It was west of Childress. We hunted southeast. We hunted geese in there southeast of Childress.
Okay.
But then we went back west. What was the name? That big ranch. What is it? The 101 or I can't remember.
I don't remember myself.
Boy, it was big country. Of course,
it really
all of Texas is big. So, and then you and I have been going to Michigan with some degree of regularity the past, what would you say, 3 or 4 years to hunt. I think
that's right. Yeah.
Grouse and woodcock.
That's right. And had a ball. Great group of guys.
Yeah, and I love that country up there in the Upper Peninsula, don't you?
I do. It's really neat and so different from what we're used to here.
What's your favorite part of going up there?
Seeing all our friends up there, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm social. I mean, that's what I like.
Well, and those guys are so much like us. Does that make sense to you?
It does. And they are.
Yeah, because that was the thing that surprised me is I was expecting them to be different. Like, I don't know how, but different. But they're just like you and I.
They really are. It shouldn't be amazing, but it is. You travel all over the world, but certainly all over the U.S. And as long as you have some common interest, it's amazing how similar we all are.
Yeah, I agree.
Same worries, same hopes and desires and everything else.
They do talk funny, though.
Yeah, how many times do you hear you're going to go with?
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I'll say this for them, man. Them Michigan boys, they got good beer there in Michigan.
They do have some good beer.
You'd think Texas would have as good a beer as Michigan, but I'm just going to say I think Michigan gets to win that battle. That's just my opinion.
Well, we have to drive a little farther around Texas. Surely there's a few places we've missed.
And I won't speak for you, but I've tried a lot of them.
I've tried all I could.
Yeah, Michigan sure ranks right up there as far as
It
beer
really
goes.
does.
When we were going to Arizona, that was before the craft beer craze. So who knows? They might have some hellacious craft beers in Arizona these days that we just didn't know about back then.
Yep, probably didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
And like you said, we weren't staying in the best places to hunt or to find craft beers back then either.
Yeah, maybe with age comes the ability to be a little more refined in our choice of housing.
That's true.
So of the game birds that we shot in Arizona, and I would say that would be Gambels quail, blue quail, and Mearns quail. Which was your favorite?
I think the Mearns were. The blue quail obviously were very similar to what we have here, and while I really enjoyed it, it was the difference. And the Mearns quail were such a different animal, and the country we hunted them in was such different. The short scrub oak and the little arroyos and
the big old feet on those birds. The big old feet. I love them big feet.
Well, and the birds did. I mean, they were insane. They'd bust. They'd set so tight that you could just walk into the middle of them, and then when they would bust, they'd fly into you and completely encircle you, and then they would disappear around the little scrub oak in a heartbeat.
I found them hard to hit.
They were very hard to hit. They didn't fly a straight line ever.
Yeah, like trying to shoot a mosquito.
Yeah, I can remember the first time we dumped your dog out down there, and her eyes were rolling back in her head because we didn't know we dumped her out right into the middle of the covey.
She was locked up tight. There were birds all around her.
We thought she was having some sort of seizure. She hadn't even gotten 5 foot from the trailer.
Yeah. Oh, that's bad for a hunt dog. They need to earn their points.
Well, we certainly didn't do any damage to them because we were trying to shoo her away.
Yeah. Oh, and then birds started getting up, scared us half to death.
Yeah, we weren't ready.
Oh my Lord! So then, in our travels to Texas, and you and I have traveled to Texas dozens of times to hunt, mostly to hunt pigs and white-tailed deer, but we've also gone down and bird hunted with Joe, and we would have shot both blues and bobwhites down in that mesquite country. Which was your favorite of them, if you have one?
I think probably the bobwhite, and I did remember we did go down to Eagle Pass, Texas one time and shoot bobs as well.
Shot bobs, that's right. We did. We flew down there, didn't we?
We did. That's a long ways to drive. I was glad we flew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was cactus country. That's right. I'd forgotten about that. Big cactus, great big old prickly pear cactus with bobwhite quail all in them.
Yep.
My
That
dog.
was the strangest thing to hunt too. I mean, in that cactus.
Yeah, my dogs would have taken one look at that pasture and said, I'm going back to Oklahoma.
I felt the same way walking through there. I didn't think I had quite enough boot. My upland boot is not ready for it.
Yeah, that was amazing. And didn't he have at least one Brittany, maybe two?
He had Brittany's and he had Cocker Spaniels.
I'll be damned.
Lefty was a Cocker Spaniel.
Yeah, that was a fun little hunt. Drank a lot of wine down there too. They got good wine in that country.
He did. He had a pretty nice collection.
Yeah. I did my best to make a dent in it. Oh, Lord. Oh. And so in Michigan, now you and I have shot sharptail, or at least I've shot sharptail. Did you shoot a sharptail?
I shot at one is the best I can say. I didn't really ever have a good shot at one. They were a long ways, but I made noise.
Okay, so sharptail and rough grouse, and then we shot woodcock.
That's right.
Of those three species, which one's your favorite?
I got to be honest. I think actually the ruffed grouse was my favorite.
The
woodcock was a lot of fun, but I've never seen forests so thick that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It really bothered me to not even be able to get your shotgun all the way up sometimes.
Yeah, I get I get like claustrophobic up there in the woods sometimes. I'm used to being able to see now.
Yeah. It really bothered me that 10 steps from the vehicle, you could no longer see the vehicle.
What was it my brother said? That there's woods up there a fat man can't walk through.
I've proved that true. I
Oh,
left a
Lord.
lot of scraps of hide and clothing up there, just dragging them through the brush.
Have you noticed how the Michigan boys? That's like a religion to them. You know, kind of like you get some pretty religious quail hunters in Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas. But that grouse hunting up there is kind of a religion to them boys.
It is. I was amazed at the time and effort they dedicate to it and scouting it out. And
Oh, their maps.
yes, it's like handed down father to son. And I mean,
And they've all got those big GPSs in their trucks, and they've got that chip that's got all their grouse hunting spots on it. And I swear to God, I think they'd shoot you if you tried to take that chip.
I wouldn't even bother. I couldn't find it again, even if they told me how to get there.
That's right. That was so much fun hunting with them boys. Gosh, it's so much fun. And they got good dogs up there too. That's the one thing my takeaway with both Texas. I mean, Joe's got some great bird dogs down in Texas, but them Michigan boys, they make some really, really good bird dogs.
They really do. You know, they've come down here and hunt with us, and I think that's been a lot of fun. And you get to see their dogs really range out and do some things that they don't get to do in Michigan near as much. And I think that it's interesting to see how different their dogs behave when they get down here and they have wide open country because they're not used to ranging out.
That's right. And those dogs really, I'm kind of bent this way, but especially the pointers and the setters, those dogs take to the quail hunting down here. You know, the first day or so they're kind of figuring it out. By day 2 or day 3, they've got that game figured out, and they're running and finding coveys and holding birds and doing a great job. I've been really impressed with the quality of bird dog they bring.
I agree, and I just always assumed it was because it was so much easier to do down here.
Yeah, maybe that's true. I like the woodcock shooting. I mean, for pure like shooting, and I know there's a lot of those grouse guys that'll grumble when they hear me say this, but there's kind of a mystique to those woodcock that between the way they flush, the way they fly, and the way they hold for a dog, and you know they're not hard to hit. At least I haven't found them hard to hit, but it just seems, I don't know, kind of spiritual to me in a lot of ways.
I agree. And how many times do you hear them flush and you never see them?
Yeah,
I thought that was always really interesting. I mean, you know they're right there, but you never can find them.
That's right. So thick. So, and you and I, of course, I get to hear you complain about all the trespassing difficulties and you know, all the fun you get to have during hunting season with people that just show up and think they can hunt wherever the heck they want to. Why don't you tell me your funniest trespassing story?
Oh gosh, I'll tell you my funniest one. It was when I was quite a bit younger.
And I mean now, Jason, I mean the ones where somebody else is trespassing on you, not where, for example, you and your buddies might be trespassing on somebody else. Don't tell those stories.
That's right. And I got to tell you, I try very hard not to do that. I've got such a it chaps my hide so much that I really try to avoid that. But we had a fellow, and I was probably 17 or 18 years old, and I worked at the ranch, and it was a working ranch, still is. And so we had a truck and trailer and some horses loaded up, and we were going out to a pasture to check. And we drove up on a fellow that had shot a deer. And he's in a car. So you can picture this. It's, I don't know, an Oldsmobile or something. And he's got the trunk open, and he's gutted the deer alongside the road, and he's attempting to tie the deer down, I guess, on his hood. And he's got his gun and a bunch of stuff leaned up on the back of his car. And we drive up, and, you know, when we get about, I don't know, 200-300 yards back, he loses it, freaks out. He jumps in his car, and he drives off.
His gun goes flying, I bet.
Oh, it just fell over in the road. You know, we pulled up. There's a couple of boxes of shells and a gun and some gloves and, get all that stuff and load it in the back of the truck, kind of keep driving along. And, the road doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, where is he running to?
Yeah, that's right. Down there on the ranch, it just kind of goes to the bottom and stops, I bet.
Well, there's a place, and he managed to squirt out, and I would never have believed he could have wedged that car through there. But there was a little old 2-track road, that had been driven through by 4-wheel drives for long enough that even in the 4-wheel drive, the bottom drug in the tracks. And he managed to drag that car up through that road and out that back side of their place. But I can't imagine his oil pan was still intact or anything else. But I don't know how terrified he was of getting caught. But that's probably one of my favorite stories. Yeah. And that gun ran around on the ranch. It got handed around several times. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was a old Remington 700, and I think it was in a real common caliber 30-06 or something.
A lot of deer got shot with that gun.
A lot of deer, the hired hands and the ranch manager, they passed that thing around a bunch. And the story always went with it.
Amazing what a guilty conscience will do to a guy, isn't it?
It is exactly right. One of my other favorites, or funnies, is some bird hunters that we ran up on, and you got to understand, we're a group of about 80 guys. It was a customer hunting weekend.
We got to talk about those. Those are so cool. But tell your story.
So we got 80 guys. We're pulling up in a group of pickups and Suburbans and stuff, and there's 3 guys kind of out in the middle of one of our big fields trying to hunt it. And I mean,
do they have a dog?
I don't remember there being a dog, so I'm going to say no. And you've seen those big fields. They're not doing any good. They're just harassing the birds and making a nuisance of themselves. So we pull up and proceed to, we're unloading folks and lining them up and doing all our stuff. And they have to come to us because their car is over by us. They just kind of walked out there to make a big circle or whatever. And they don't want to come see us.
No, I bet not.
But they got no place to go. And eventually, they come over and say, well, we've got permission to hunt here. And, that's always the first answer. We've got permission. We asked somebody, the guy down the road, the lady in town at the convenience store, whatever. And they always have a story. And they proceed to tell us they have permission. And they tell my dad that his dad, who's deceased, by the way, gave him permission. And my dad's standing there, and he says, so Lad Hitch gave you permission? Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're friends with Lad, and he told us it was just fine, that we could come up here and hunt. And
oh, God, I bet your dad was so mad.
Well, the really funny part was it turned out it was true, but he'd given him permission like 20 years ago.
Oh. Had they been coming out there that whole time?
No, they'd never been. They no more knew my granddad well enough. He'd run into him at a meeting and told him to come out and join him for a quick hunt, and they'd never taken him up on it. And so this guy's telling the story to his buddies, I'm sure, over a beer, and says, well, Lad Hitch gave me permission back in, 1982. Surely we can still exercise on that.
Oh, God. And didn't you have one guy tell you that you'd given him permission? He said your name? He said, he did. Jason Hitch gave me permission. You're like, oh, really?
Yep. I've had that happen to me, or tell them that, my dad or somebody else that I obviously knew didn't give him permission, I give him permission. My fun thing to do with them, especially when I don't want to mess around with them, I just want to run them off, is tell them they need to go get permission from the owner, and I tell them where the office is and everything else.
Which is like 20 miles away in town for people that don't know. I know.
And then I drive to town just as fast as I can, and I meet them at the office.
Oh, Lord. That is great. They're like, we're not going to get permission, are we?
Yeah, that's exactly. They have that look on their faces. They're coming in. This guy told us that we need to come in here and get permission. They show them back, and they say, you can just see their emotion just sink out of them. I mean, they're sunk.
Yeah. Well, that's what they deserve, frankly.
It is. I mean, it's not that we dislike people, but it's not public hunting. It's private land, and like I said, we try to save some for our employees and some for our family and some for our customers. And at some point later in the season, we may not even worry about it, but for a while there, it's a big deal for all of our people to be able to use that stuff. And these folks come out, and a lot of them are incredibly snotty about, well, by God, it's, I pay my taxes. I ought to be able to, hunt wherever I want or do whatever I want. And I want to tell them I pay my taxes too, and probably pay a whole bunch more because we got all this land. And
yeah, that's right.
this land isn't public land.
Well, you've always been very gracious to me, and I appreciate you being accommodating. And I understand. I mean, I know I've told you in the past that I understand that you can't just do that for everybody. I mean, it just doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. And you have some funny stories too. I know one of them's a deer story, but it's still one of the better ones. You'll have to tell it sometime.
If it involves me trespassing, I'm not going to tell it.
Now you're setting in a blind, as I recall.
Oh yeah, the guys that shot the deer below me.
Yes, while you're archery hunting.
Well, and that's only funny if you know what I do for a living, is what it amounts to.
That's exactly right.
So I'll tell it since you brought it up. So I like to bow hunt, and I was out. Oh, it's probably been 3 years ago, bow hunting in November. And it was a beautiful November day, and it was the opening day of deer gun season in Oklahoma. And I haven't hunted deer with a rifle in several years, but I was out that day bow hunting, sitting in my tree stand, and I see this little whitetail. He wasn't very big. He probably was a 10-pointer, but he was a 2, maybe 3-year-old deer, and he's coming to where I've got the corn feeder out, where my tree stand's at, and he's coming down the trail towards me, and I don't know, he's maybe 150 yards from me, right down at the creek, and boom! And he stops, and then boom, boom, and boom, he falls over. And I'm like, what in the hell is that? And I know that there's nobody else on the place because I can see it's pretty open country. And I look over, and there's a ground blind on the other side of the fence on the neighbor, and they've got that ground blind right up against the barbed wire fence, and they're shooting right down my creek line. And I look over, and 2 guys crawl out of that ground blind. They're maybe 350 yards from me on the opposite side of the creek, and they're high-fiving one another and trying to figure out how to crawl over the 5-wire barbed wire fence to get onto my property to get the deer that they just shot right underneath me. And I'm sitting up in the tree stand, and when they start coming over, I take my camo hat off and put a blaze orange hat on that I have in my backpack so I don't get shot. And they must have seen me, because when they get to him, they grab him and they drag him back to that fence line as quickly as they can. All the while I'm talking to the game warden on the telephone, and the game warden's like, "Judge, do not go down there." I was like, oh, I was so mad. And sitting there, and Jason, you know what made me probably the angriest of all? Other than the high fives, I got to admit the high fives pissed me off. But they get him to the fence, and they can't figure out how to get him under the fence. So, like, you can almost see this discussion about, we got to get him over on this side. And I think they ended up passing him over. Right, one of them picked him up and set him up on the top, and the other one was on the other side and grabbed him and rolled him over. And I'm like, God, I hope you get kicked in the face when you're doing that. And the game warden showed up and wrote them big o nasty tickets and confiscated their deer. And my back was up. I never did. I didn't go down there. I stayed where I did what I was told, but it was hard for me. So I got a little taste of what, I know you've dealt with down through the years, and it's just rude.
It is
more
rude.
Than anything else,
Yep. And I got to admit, in today's world, and it happened to my brother. It hadn't happened to me. I don't even know how I'd quite react, but he's had someone semi-threaten him with one of their guns when he drove up on him and asked him to leave. And we ended up having to call the sheriff, and they tried to say it was something else. Fortunately, Chris had made a recording on his cell phone of what all had transpired. And this guy has his kid and his kid's friend. I mean, so they got like a 13-year-old and his buddy with his dad, that he's showing them how to do this, and threatens my brother, and then tries to lie to the sheriff. And I mean, what kind of example were they setting for those kids?
Yeah,
it was
not a
pretty
good
sad.
one. Yeah. So I've been meaning to ask you this whole time because I love this, but you guys would put on a company hunt. When I first started hunting on you, every year, like opening weekend of pheasant season, you guys had this company hunt. Why don't you tell people about that company hunt?
All right. It was one of my favorite things growing up. I just couldn't wait till I could get old enough to go and do the company hunt. And back in the 70s, when I was growing up in the early 80s, we are a custom cattle feeding operation in our feed yards. And so we had a lot of customers, and hunting was a big deal. And it was a time of year when for a lot of them, they were farming or doing something that it was slow at home.
Yeah, and just so people know, I mean, you and I kind of speak the same language, but these customers would be people that would pay your family to feed cattle that they owned so that they would gain weight and they could then take them to the auction and sell them.
That's correct.
They would buy cows.
Or sell them directly to a packer or something like that.
Okay, so they would send their cows to you, and you guys would feed them in your feedlot to put weight on them before they got sold to the packer.
That's right.
Okay.
And so a lot of these customers we did business with for literally decades, and might even be 2 or 3 generations of them. So I grew up around them, and they grown up around me, and we knew everybody. Ag is still a very much a handshake, family-oriented business. I don't know if it's one of the last ones, but it's certainly still one of those businesses. And so a lot of these guys I saw at least once a year, and sometimes several times a year, but they'd all come out, and we had an old bunkhouse that we'd put them up in, and that bunkhouse probably had 50 bunk beds in it, and showers and stuff. And what it had originally been was, when we first started out farming and ranching, a lot of these guys came up from Mexico or wherever, or even just single guys in the area. They didn't have a place to be. And so they needed housing, and we would bunk all those guys in that bunkhouse. And over time, that became less and less of a thing, and we still had the bunkhouse. And so for customers and occasionally some employees, we would let them stay there, and it had a kitchen and bathrooms and all the rest. Anyway, so the customers would come and stay there, and a lot of times we'd put on a feed down at the house, and we certainly cleaned all the birds. That was the first thing I got to do as a kid, was
clean all the birds. Played the guitar, wouldn't he?
He did. He played the guitar, and we
maybe
cleaned
even
birds.
Sang a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and have a great time. And, we'd set up the TV and watch football, and the guys would all come down after they were done hunting, and early in the morning they'd come down and drink coffee, and my mom would make cinnamon rolls, and that was just kind of how we started out. So I grew up doing this, and like I said, it's a big group. Could be as much as 80 to 100 people. A lot of times it was just 50 or 60 though. And we would start out in the mornings, and you got all these guys, and a lot of them don't hunt very often, and they've certainly not hunted a lot of pheasant other than that once a year.
I saw a lot of duck guns.
Exactly. Yep. Really long, sometimes pump, sometimes bolt action, and very few newer, more upland type guns.
Not a lot of side by side.
No, not hardly any. And so you take him out to a field first thing in the morning, and it's just kind of like you warm up your dogs. You take him out to a field that didn't have a lot of necessary birds in it, but had some cover, and it was a great big field. Take them to one of the biggest fields you have, and you line up about 2/3 to 3/4 of them on one side, and the other 1/3 to 1/4 you would put at the other end, sort of spread out, and they would be your blockers, which just means they're trying to hold the birds and keep them from running out the end of the field, and shoot at the ones that try to fly over. And then those guys the walkers at the other end, the 2/3 or 3/4, would then start walking across the field towards the blockers. And you walk them in that field right off, and you get to kind of wear them down, and they get kind of that early morning jitters out of the way. Might get a couple of shots, and You have the talk about not shooting at each other and wait till they're up in the sky, and um, try to correct anybody who's walking too far in front or walking too slow, because you really don't want to be in the line of fire. You try to keep all the guys in as straight a line as possible. That
Yeah, that's
way,
right.
they've got the widest, if you spread your arms out, if you've got about 90 degrees or even 60 degrees of shooting lane, as long as everybody's lined up, it works that fine, and you're not a danger to anybody. But if you got any person who's slightly out of line, that can cause a lot of problems and endanger everybody.
Oh, what a heartache. I just can't imagine. Your dad must have been a patient soul.
He and several of his employees, and they really enjoyed it. And like I said, a lot of these guys we'd known a long time, but um, it was fun, and it always required a bit of patience and understanding, but it was always a lot of fun. And so, then later in the day, when they'd gotten kind of cocky and things had gone well for them, and they'd hunted some fields with birds in it, then you take them onto the feed yard, and the feed yard has canyons, draws, that are choked full of weeds and choked full of birds, because those birds can crawl up in the cattle pens and eat corn right out of the bunk that the cattle would normally eat. And you've shot them, I know, and so it's one of the
Maybe one
strangest
or
things.
two.
The field birds are really dark meat, and
Yeah.
they're very wild and kind of gamey bird. The pheasants out of the feed yard are almost white meat.
Yeah, they're the best tasting pheasants ever.
But it's really hard walking.
Yeah.
Those weeds can get taller than your head, and you never know when there might be a chug hole or something else down there under the weeds, and so it can be kind of a rodeo hunting around down in there. But the hunting is amazing, and you do that at the end of the day, just before everybody's tuckered out, and have an amazing hunt, and you wrap up the day. And
Yeah, I've seen
grew up
200 birds in the air down there, 200 pheasant in the air all at one time. I know I have. I know you have too.
absolutely, and shoot them and have a great time, and it is a really, really fun. Like I said, a lot of camaraderie. You talk a lot of smack, as hunters and fishermen are apt to do. When you get a group of guys together, you got to tell him, that was a terrible shot. I can't believe you took it, or things like that. Whatever encouragement dribbles off your lips. But I grew up always wanting to do it, and then when I got the chance to do it, I enjoyed every minute of it. I had a blast, and amazingly enough, in all the years that we did it, we had almost no injuries, and we only had one death, and it was actually just a heart attack. The guy walked and got too hot and had a heart attack and died. That's the only major thing that ever happened in all the years, and I cannot believe that that's true, but that is actually the truth. We never had anybody get shot badly. I probably have taken just as much injuries as anybody else, and it was just a stray pellet caught me in the lip, and other than having a big fat lip, it didn't really do much to me.
Yeah. Well, and I always tell people this story when we talk about those company hunts, but I came up, it was opening weekend, and I think I was out with Larry, another friend of ours, hunting pheasant with our dogs, and I roll up and you guys are, what's the place that has the weed field with the cell tower in the middle of it?
Oh, the Scott place.
Yeah, and you guys had that place surrounded. There was probably 60 hunters, and you guys had that place surrounded, and the wind had been blowing, so those birds were all in those weeds, and I was standing. We were on the corner up there, and I could swear your dad was there, but he may have already passed. But I know you and I were standing up there because there was no way I was going to take my dogs and go out there, but I wanted to watch the show. And as those pushers come working, you'd see that those birds start right in the middle. They'd come up out of that grass and those weeds, and then they go right back down. And then after a while, it just looked like the grass was alive, like It was moving out in the middle. And finally, one of those pheasant broke. And I know I'm no wildlife biologist, but I just know a pheasant can't fly straight up. I think it's physically impossible. but those birds were trying their best to fly straight up, and they couldn't do it. They had to go to one side or the other a little bit, and they'd get up in the air maybe 40, 50 yards, and those guys with the big old long goose guns on the road would be oh boom, oh boom, oh boom. And some of the birds got high enough that they made it, but most of them didn't, you know. And
Absolutely.
I have no idea how many pheasant they killed in that pass, but it was a lot. It was a
Well, I
lot.
know, and it may have been that year you're talking about. That one year, in that pass, it was their second field they'd walked, and they limited out.
No, yeah, I have no doubt. I bet I saw 50 birds get shot, you know, in the space of what would you say, 15 minutes?
Yeah, if even that.
And then it was just amazing to me because like a whole line of guys would just be hammering away at this bird that's 50, 60 yards up in the air, and he's just working as much as he can to try to get elevation. oh, and I could just stand there and shake my head. And
How many how many times have you seen something like that, especially someone who's not very familiar with how durable pheasants are, and they powder the tar out of it, and then they forget about it, and it dies 20, 30 yards behind them and just falls dead and out of the sky. Yep.
Boop.
And you got to tell them to go over there and pick their bird up.
I worried about one of the birds hitting a hunter in the head, you know.
Oh, I've had it knock you right off your feet.
I bet it would. It'd probably knock you out. Oh, that's a sight I will never forget. I never will forget that the rest of my life. Well, Jason, before we quit, do you have any advice to people, you know, about how to best approach a landowner? What might be the most successful way to obtain permission from a local landowner to hunt?
Obviously, calling them ahead of time, trying to meet up with them, offering, I've had some of them to offer to let me go hunt with them, which is always pleasant. And sometimes I take them up on it, but most of the time I don't. But making contact before you're actually out doing something is the best way. It's the easiest, it's the easiest no you'll receive, and you'd be surprised at the number of times that it's okay.
Yeah.
They might tell you that you can hunt this field, but not that field over there, and they might even have a reason. Like I said, sometimes we save some ground for family or something else. But I think talking to them ahead of time, and if you've got something, I hate to say a sob story, but you know, if you've got kids or whatever with you, for me at least, that certainly plays something, because I believe in getting the next generation interested in hunting. So we try to make allowances for stuff like that. It certainly means something to me, and I think most people who are landowners and work and live on the land are pretty amenable to having people who are well behaved and interested in using the land but not abusing it. I will tell you, one of the other things that has at times set my teeth on edge is lots of empty shells or empty trash if they leave that around.
Yeah, just people being rude.
Exactly. Even if they have permission, they won't get it the next time.
Yeah.
You kind of remember stuff like that. If they make a mess of it, the next time they ask, I'll say no. But for the most part, people are good, and they do take good care of it. And the bulk of people do ask and get permission. And early in the season is always tougher. There's a lot of higher demand, as everybody knows that's a hunter. The first opening weekend and all that is a tough time to give permission because everybody wants permission.
Yeah, so maybe wait for the less I guess critical times.
Give it a week or two to die down, and a lot of times it gets really easy to go find places. I know I've been up to Nebraska and South Dakota chasing pheasants, and we always wait until later in the season because it's a lot easier. Everybody's tired of it. They've had their big hoopla, and you can tend to get on to places that otherwise you'd never see.
And I had a really nice guy, and him, the Mitchell fella, and he may be dead now. It'd be Brian's dad up in Elkhart.
Don.
Now I went in to ask permission to hunt on their stuff, and they had like printouts of maps showing what they owned. They'd taken a plat map and made photocopies, and it highlighted their property, and they stapled them together, and he had a stack of them there on his desk. And I said, do you mind if I go hunt birds on you? And he said, son, those pheasant aren't mine. I'm just taking care of them for everybody. Sure, knock yourself out, have a good time. If there's cows out there, don't I don't want you anywhere we got cattle. So if you see cows, don't be on it. And I think a lot of landowners are that way, you know.
I agree, and I will tell you, not that I want to necessarily plug for them, but I do really enjoy it. Is the Onyx Maps hunting app for cell phones? I think that's a game changer. The ability to figure out who owns what, and because this occurred a few years back before I discovered that app, but we gave someone permission to hunt on us and gave them a map, and they got confused where they were, and they accidentally hunted on one of my neighbors, who of course didn't take that very well, especially when they said, well, the Hitches said we could.
I bet that was bad.
Yeah, it didn't go over very well, and they called us and they were mad that we were giving permission for someone to hunt on their property, and of course we weren't. But it was just a confusion, and you know how it is up in our area where everything's a square grid. Every section looks pretty much like the next section. And
I've made that mistake.
It's easy to do, and the guys weren't trying to be rude when they told him that the Hitches had given permission.
They legitimately thought they had permission.
Yeah, it was a misunderstanding. But I think something like that Onyx Maps deal really makes that kind of stuff a lot easier. It's easier to figure out who owns what and where you're at. And then additionally, in some of these states, and you and I have been to Michigan and Arizona and some of the places that do have pretty extensive public hunting, it delineates all that and makes it really easy to find and use. I just think things like that, those new wave technologies are going to help with a lot of that stuff to the extent that people want to be helped.
Absolutely, and people don't have any excuse in this day and age to not know where they're at with some degree of accuracy. Hey, Brent, I saw today that he's about to get an order out of his shirts. I can't remember what they're called. I think they're called the Kiowa shirts. We'll have to get us some of those. They look pretty cool.
Yeah, he gave me a shirt last year when we hunted with him, and I wear it all the time. I love it. He builds some good stuff. Yep.
Folks could go to pikegear.com and check out what he's offering and maybe buy him some hunting clothing if they want to. And Jason, I think we'll close with that. I sure appreciate your time this evening, and it's been a lot of fun talking to you.
A lot of good memories.
All right. Yeah, have a nice evening.
You too.
Whoa. Got her? I'm going to stay to the left. You take them to the right. No missing. They're ahead of her quite a ways, I can tell. Probably on this hillside. I got one down. Go down, go down. I got to get to it.